Good afternoon, everyone. My name is, Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Burnell Hall. I'm the President and CEO of Invest Newark, the City of Newark's Economic Development Corporation. We are excited to bring you a informational session regarding the New Jersey Economic Development Authority's Small Business Grant. Phase 2 will focus on helping small and minority business not only survive the tragic impact of COVID-19, but also thrive as we reopen and recover from it. We are fortunate to have a great number of partners with us today to give you a wide range of information. So we thank you all for making time for us. We have today with us the CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Mr. Tim Sullivan. We also have with us today the President and CEO of the Newark Alliance, Ms. Aisha Glover, the Deputy Mayor of the City of Newark Economic and Housing Development Department, Allison Ladd, will be joining us later in the program. And we also have with us today City Medina, who is the head of Equal Space, which is a great partner to both the city as well as our other partners who worked to help small business to grow in the city of Newark. Rounding out our panel is going to be Dr. Letitia Baricchia, who is the Professor of Entrepreneurship and Chair of the Delta NJAC Small Business Ready program. And we'll have also with us today, Chiosa, who is the Chief Opportunity Zone Officer for the city of Newark, to talk about how the phase 2 of the small business grant can be used to build businesses within Newark's opportunity zones. Again, we'd like to thank all of our partners. And with that, we want to get into the program. But before we do so, I'd just like to talk about some of the work that's already been done by some of the partners here. As you know, the city of Newark, under the leadership of Mayor Baraka, and of course, Governor Murphy, has been aggressively trying to help small businesses in a variety of ways. Director Ladd will talk about some of the programs in more detail, but specifically to Invest Newark, we have been working actively with our partners, including Audible and Newark Venture Partners, to provide technical assistance to small businesses as they work through the plethora of federal, state, and local assistance programs that have been offered, including but not limited to Newark Small Business Emergency Grant Program, as well as the state's phase 1 small business grant program, and the payroll protection program, which we did a webinar early on, and it's available via our website. The city of Newark, as well as Invest Newark and Newark Alliance, post daily information that is extremely important for small businesses throughout the city as it relates to resources that are continually being added to the tool set that we're providing to help small businesses as we reopen our economy in a safe but efficient manner. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Aisha Glover, President and CEO of the Newark Alliance, to talk about some of the work that the anchor organizations in the city of Newark are doing to help our small community work through the issues associated with COVID-19.
Sure, great. Thank you, Burnell, for that introduction and for your support and leadership and partnership, particularly as it relates to helping small businesses in the city of Newark. To all my colleagues, I'm not going to run through everyone's names. I hope that the attendees just realize that it does indeed take a village, that there is really an army of folks that have been working aggressively both in the city and the state to really identify ways to assist you. Tim Sullivan has just been in the governor's time and the state's really attention to detail around the needs in the city of Newark, and particularly really what today's webinar is about. How do we find ways to expand reach into majority minority communities? We know that oftentimes our ability to access these various grant and funding opportunities is limited. And so we're trying to do everything that we can in order to ensure that you are getting access to the information as quickly and as efficiently as possible. A couple of quick things that I'll say about the Alliance that is relevant for today. The Alliance houses the mayor's Hire by Live initiative, and that's really a push to the corporate and institutional partners in the city to hire locally, buy and procure their products and services locally, and to incentivize their staff to live locally, thereby increasing their local economic footprint. So that initiative and the work that comes out of that initiative is really a level of assistance, hand-holding, and honestly, some accountability as well, right? And so corporations have indicated that they have an interest in investing in our city. The mayor holds them accountable, and then the Alliance and our staff are really trying to provide a system for support and connection. So really privileged to be able to work closely with Invest Newark as well, because we don't do the direct small business support. We're actually working more directly and in lockstep with the corporations, with procurement officers, with their purchasing agents, to make sure that as opportunities come, and it's beyond just the short-term immediate funding or grant opportunity or loan opportunity, this is how do you get contracts, right? How do you really think about business development from an institutional perspective, and how do we ensure that we're aware of the small businesses that are ready, willing, and able to be a supplier or a vendor to a corporation or institution in the city of Newark. Invest Newark has helped to stand up an online procurement portal. And then so what we're trying to do and work on the back end of that is just connecting the institutions both to the portal, but then more directly and deliberately making sure that they're aware of businesses in the city that can support. So I'll give you two quick data points and then turn it back over. In 2015, the city itself, City Hall, city administration, was procuring about 3% of its products and services from Newark-based businesses. So at the time where the mayor began to push corporations to look inward about what they could be, ways that they could be increasing their own local procurement, this city actually looked and was more reflective of its own purchasing habits. Since then, it has gone up to 30%. Just phenomenal. It's a great number. We want to celebrate it. But the mayor also reminds us that that means that 70% of that purchasing leakage is still happening at City Hall. And so we're trying to continue to assist and work closely with the city's purchasing department in that regard as well. On the corporate and institutional side, that was also very close to 3%. And it's not all the same, right? Some folks are up to over 30%. I think Rutgers is over 30%. PSE&G is pretty high, RWJ Barnabas. But across the board, if you look at all the corporations and institutions in the city, we've really only helped increase that by 6%. And so as part of one of the reasons why the mayor's Newark Reopening and Recovery Strike Force included in that is really a charge around local procurement. Many of you know that we've been hyper-focused on hiring locally. We will continue to be vigilant in that regard. But I think in order for us to really think about economic recovery, local procurement, local purchasing is going to be a significant part of that. So hopefully webinars like this, information, resources that are available to you help strengthen your business in the immediate term, but really on the long-term side, what we're looking for are business development opportunities with corporations and institutions that are based in the city of Newark. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. I will now turn it over to Tim Sullivan, the President and CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, to talk specifically about the New Jersey Small Business grant phase 2 with particular detail about how it can help MWBEs in the city of Newark access the capital in a way in which we can continue to work through all of the issues that we've been impacted with via COVID-19. So Tim, I thank you again for making the time and really appreciate that you all are going to walk our businesses community through this application. Tim?
Great, now I'm here. Okay, took a second there. We got the IT in the way. Thanks, Burnell. Great to be with you, and thank you so much for inviting us and for hosting this really important panel. I'm lucky to have in my professional life at least 3 people who consistently remind me that Newark is the most important place in the world. Aisha Glover, Ty Cooper, and George Santos. One of whom Aisha sits on our board, and 2 of whom are part of our great leadership team at the EDA. So didn't take a lot of convincing for them to support the idea of us making sure we did an event with Invest Newark and the Alliance, because in all seriousness, of course, Newark is such a centerpiece of New Jersey's economy, and is the center of so much of the good things that are happening in our state prior to this crisis. And we've been talking all along about the COVID-19 is first and foremost a public health crisis, and it's a public health crisis that's being felt disproportionately in our cities. It's being felt disproportionately by communities of color. The loss of life now approaching, and it might have even gotten over 12,000 today. I didn't see the latest numbers, but 12,000 of our fellow New Jersey residents have lost their lives, and 150,000 plus or minus cases of people who've been impacted by this that we know about. An extraordinary public health crisis and human suffering. Right behind it, it's an economic crisis. It's an economic crisis that is also being felt disproportionately by communities of color, particularly African American and Latinx owned businesses, women-owned businesses that struggled to access capital equitably prior to this crisis, and have only had a harder time in the last 2-3 months. We've been reminded in the last 7 or 8 or 9 days that those 2 crises, the economic crisis and the public health crisis, have been operating in a context of a multi-generational, sometimes less visible but very visible right now, crisis of justice and fairness and equity and equality, particularly for communities of color, that is unsolved. And what happened with the murder of George Floyd, and the reaction, the righteous anger and fury has been expressed all around the country, and perhaps nowhere more powerfully than the city of Newark over this past weekend and the last couple of days. Has been, I think, an extraordinary reminder of the unfinished work of the American promise. And as we think about recovery and recovering from this pandemic and recovering from this economic crisis, we have to redouble, triple, if that's a word, our commitment from the governor on down, and with all of our partners at the municipal level and in the counties and the private sector, to doing everything we can to build a fairer and stronger but fairer New Jersey economy. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how we do that with this one program, which is a step in the right direction. It's a decent step in the right direction, but the work we have ahead of us collectively to ensure that economic justice is part of any economic recovery has to be central to our work. And so I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to be with everyone, and all kidding aside, for the leadership of people like Aisha and of course Burnell and Allison at the city level, and Ty and George and our great team at the EDA in working through these issues and bringing them front and center. And in fact, it was Ty, since we're on Newark focus, when I give Ty the shout out she deserves with a group of people that know her so well. It was her idea when we're talking about how when we talk later about the opportunity zone overlay to our funding. It was Ty Cooper's idea for how we could make sure we were getting a lot of the funding that the governor had allocated for small business through using the opportunity zone mapping that she's been such a national leader on. So big shout out to Ty. I'd also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Mayor Baracco. I know he's not on the phone, but his great team is what an extraordinary leader, again, he was prior to this crisis and has been through the health dimensions of this crisis and through the last couple of days being a national model of leadership. Just an extraordinary demonstration of his leadership, and I'm in awe of him, and I was before, and even more so now. With that, I want to turn to what we're here to talk about, which is the new grant program and our economic relief package. I think, Jake, if you're driving, give me a couple slides. We'll jump right into it. Actually, I'm going to skip some of the drum roll. If you can go next slide, please. So our Governor Murphy's really been focused on supporting small business through this entire crisis, again, because we know that small businesses are really bearing the brunt of this crisis, particularly minority-owned and women-owned firms. Sure, Antoinette, I can absolutely speak up. Apologize. The programs we put together that the governor has been supporting and leading take a few different dimensions. One, a grant program, which is what we're going to talk about in the most detail today. Emergency loan program. Some work with our CDFI partners, including some Newark-based organizations that you hopefully know well, as well as some technical assistance that we've been providing to businesses all throughout the state. Next slide, please, Jake. So the first thing we did back in early April, we opened an application window for a grant program. If I recall correctly, EDA's grant program and the City of Newark's program were rolling out right around the same time. We did a webinar together with both of our U.S. senators right around the same time. We were swamped with applications. We thought the first $5 million could go and cover maybe 2,000 businesses across the state. We got more than 34,000 applications across the entire state, and so extraordinary demonstration of the pain and the suffering and the needs of the small business community. The reason I mentioned this program, it was oversubscribed. The reason I mentioned it again is that of the 50 million, of the 50 million that the governor allocated from the Federal CARES Act to support small business, just most recently, we're taking 5 million to double the size of the original program and fill up some of the backlog, the wait list from phase one. So we've actually already awarded about 1,000 more grants under phase one. We've got another 500 to 1,000 left to do in the next couple of days and weeks. But that grant round continues to get some funding put against it. But more importantly, kind of the main event for today. Next slide, please, Jake. The EDA board and Aisha and her great participation in that board, thank you, Aisha, approved about 10 days ago an allocation of a new program, or the creation of a new program, excuse me, of a $45 million pool of funding that is broader in eligibility in several ways. It's broader in that it's open to businesses a little bigger this time, but not very big, up to 25 full-time equivalents. But importantly, too, this time around, we increased the eligibility to include sole proprietorships. We increased the eligibility to include home-based businesses, and we got rid of the industry restrictions that we had the first time around. The first time around, we really focused on the sectors that were most particularly impacted, folks like restaurants and retail, personal care, those kinds of places. Now, sadly, by the time we get around to early June, there's really no sector of the economy that's not been really impacted, particularly the small business economy. And so those industry restrictions have gone away. Nonprofits are eligible for this round of funding. One more, Jake, you jumped on me there. Nonprofits are eligible, broadly speaking, on the same basis that for-profits are. So that's an important piece of this as well. Next slide, please, Jake. Really importantly, probably the most important dimension of this whole program and this whole round of funding is that of the 45 million that has been allocated for this new grant program, a third of it, 15 million, has been reserved for businesses that are located in Opportunity Zone eligible census tracts. The Opportunity Zone component was part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Governor Murphy likes to call it the only good part of that bill for New Jersey, and that was due to the leadership of Senator Booker, who sponsored that part of the legislation. The Opportunity Zone map basically identifies high poverty, high unemployment, low income census tracts across the state, about 750 of them. That full list of the census tracts that were eligible to be designated as opportunity zones are is the map we're using for the 15 million of it, the at least 15 million that we reserve for businesses in those census tracts. As we think too about our equity and inclusion agenda and making that real, we are making that more real. We are working really hard on the language access side of this. The application is available and can be submitted in both English and Spanish. we brought on a contractor to help us with interpretation services for 9 additional languages. So a total of 11 languages supported. And if you speak something besides those 11 languages, you can email us at languagehelp@njeda.com to we can figure out a way to help you out in whatever language you might do business in. Next slide, please, Jake. It's worth noting, I think, and again, credit to Ty and Michelle Bowden, who's our new Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer, who I don't think is on this call, but I've been on about 15,000 webinars with her in the last 3 or 4 days because we're doing so much outreach. I don't think any other state in the union is using its federal money with the opportunity zone intentionality that we are. It is an imperfect way an imperfect but very, I think, purposeful way to direct money to businesses in distressed zip codes and businesses that are minority and women owned. And so hopefully we will have as broad and inclusive a group of applicants here as we can. We've also really increased our outreach efforts. I know Medina is on this call, on this webinar, whatever we're calling these things. He's one of 3 firms, each of which are one or more of minority, women, or LGBT owned businesses that we've brought on a contract just to support our outreach efforts just for this grant program, which has been incredibly important that we get the word out far and wide. We're reaching out in lots of languages. As you can see here, there's a few different language representations here of our outreach efforts and the application that's been published in all those languages. You got to submit it in English or Spanish, but we're at least providing the questions in lots of languages. Next slide, please. We're also, again, doing targeted marketing. This is just an example of some of the work we're doing that is Spanish language marketing outreach efforts to make sure that we're trying to get the word out far and wide and really trying to be as inclusive as we can be. And this is an example of how we're trying to do things differently, trying to do things in a new way to push ourselves to really make real and more real a equity inclusion agenda here. Next slide, please. So I thought what I'd do, and Bernal, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna go through this in some detail. I think you told us that folks will want to see the meat of the application here. So I'm gonna, without making this too much of a teacher-student situation here where I give a lecture, I will try and walk us through the high points of the application just so folks are ready for it. Importantly, next Tuesday morning, June 9th, 9 a.m., that is the big moment. That is when the application window opens. You've got to get your application in. But just as importantly, if you go to CV, as in coronavirus.business.nj.gov right now, since Tuesday, you can access the sample version of the application anytime you want, 24 hours a day. This is an open book test. We want people to get 100. It's designed to be reasonably straightforward and reasonably easy for a government application, government program application. All the questions that you're going to have to answer, all the information that you're going to need to provide has been made available to you. The website, again, for person who's asked the question there, CV, as in coronavirus.business.nj.gov. It's where the application is. It's where the live application will be next Tuesday morning. It's also where the sample version is right now. Just some basics to be prepared for. You're going to need, basic contact information, that kind of stuff. If you get questions, if you've gotten support from either the EDA or some of the federal programs already in this crisis, you're going to need to have some information about that. It does not disqualify you. If you've gotten PPP, if you've gotten EIDL, if you've gotten an EDA grant or loan, it does not disqualify you from applying. It just means we have to ask some more questions, and I'll get into what that means in a moment, but please still apply. You're going to need to know the basics of your business, what type of entity you have, what year you were established, the tax ID, that kind of information. You're going to need to know your revenues for the 3 months that ended in May, both 2020, 2019. We'll talk about why that matters in a moment. Next slide, please. So again, if you go to cv.business.nj.gov, you can see this. We're just going to walk through some of the screenshots, call out some of the highlights here. It's, again, you can see it. If you have your glasses on, you can see that there are circles at the top that say 9. There's basically 9 windows through this whole application. This is designed to be easier than most programs and straightforward. So Jake, if you can help me click through some of these here. It starts with just the basic contact information, name, your name, business name, primary business address. That's important for the opportunity zone question. Next slide, please. So basics about your business. We're already onto the third window here. Are you a sole prop, a C Corp, an S Corp, a 501c3, 4, or 7? Those kinds of questions. You can self-identify as small business, minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, disabled-owned. You can you need to tell us about your W-2 employees, what year you were established, and your tax ID number. That's important. Again, pretty straightforward questions here. Next slide, please. We're asking what industry you're in, not because of an eligibility dimension, but just because we want to know if we're, for data purposes, are we primarily serving one industry disproportionately, or is it being spread equally around restaurants and retail and personal care and manufacturing and whatever else? So we're going to ask what industry you're in. Next slide, please. If you don't know your NAICS code, we will help you with your NAICS code. That's what this slide's about here. Next slide, please. We're going to have some basic business detail questions. Some of these are screeners for things that would make you ineligible. The first question is, are you a home-based business? That does not, that you're eligible this time if you're a home-based business. We're just asking so we know. Some of them are screeners that would make you ineligible. So gambling and gaming businesses, for example, are not eligible. What is classified as, quote, adult activities are not eligible under state statute. There's a few other types of businesses that are excluded sort of automatically. Those are sort of yes/no questions, but they're important. Next slide, please. This is a really important one. This is probably the most important one to pay attention to. This is, you have to demonstrate, and this is for eligibility for the federal funding, COVID-19 impact. The sad reality is virtually everyone's going to be able to demonstrate this, but you got to do it right. The questions we're asking are some yes/nos on were you deemed essential by the governor's executive order? Have you been able to remain open since early March? What capacity have you been open? And then your revenues. You're going to need to give us your revenues for March, April, May of 2020, March, April, May of 2019. The sad reality is almost everybody's going to be down quite a bit. That you are down is how you will demonstrate that you've had a COVID impact. If you are up, you should feel very lucky compared to how much pain and suffering there is in the whole world, particularly in small business world. You are probably not going to be eligible for a grant here. This is how you're going to demonstrate that you've got impact from the crisis. Next slide, please. We also have to go through something called duplication of benefits, or DOB. Most people think of DOB as date of birth, but here it means duplication of benefit. This has to do with this being federally funded. You basically can't get paid for the same expense twice. So if you got a PPP and you paid your April payroll with that, that's cool. Doesn't disqualify you, but we can't also give you a grant that you're going to use for your April payroll. If you have May payroll or June payroll or utility bill or inventory you've got to buy or whatever else you need to do, that's eligible. That's fine, as long as you haven't been paid for the same expense twice. So this asks some questions around the duplication of benefits question. So if you've got a PPP loan, if you've got an EIDL loan, have that information at your fingertips. You're going to need that information to help answer these questions. Again, does not disqualify you, but it's a little bit more of a detailed part of the application. Next slide, please. We're going to ask some additional background information. Again, this is not necessarily disqualifying. Give me the next slide, please, Jake. These are questions like prior convictions. Have you ever had a license or permit revoked, public debarment? Do you have any injunction orders from a government agency? Again, not necessarily disqualifying, but it does require some follow-up and some further discussion if you've got to answer yes to any of these type of situations. Again, does not automatically disqualify you, but it will generate some further discussion. Next slide, please. And then you've got to certify that a few things are true, like that you haven't made any false statements, that we can use third parties to verify some of the answers, although there's no credit agency involved in this application. We've gotten that question a few times. You've got a negative impact by COVID-19, that you're going to make a best effort not to lay off employees or rehire people if you've had to let them go. We know it's a really bad crisis, and so even with grant funding, even with loans, people have had to make layoff decisions, and certainly not what we would prefer, but we understand. You have to certify that the grant is needed by your business. Next slide, please. You have to certify that we can share this information with taxation. That's how we use to verify some of the financial information. Next slide, please. And then you put your tax ID in again one more time, and you electronically sign it. That's the whole application. That's the whole thing. So it's meant to be pretty straightforward. It's meant to be pretty easy. The first time around, the application took an average of 15, 20 minutes to submit. My guess is this time it's a little longer, 20, 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, if you've gotten previous funding. And so that's the whole application. Next slide, please, Jake. The You'll then get a tracking number. We'll email you the application, the completed applications. You have it for your files, and you'll have a way to follow up and get the status, a status tracker piece of information for your application. Next slide, please. One question we get all the time is, I've got 13 full-time employees and 8 part-time people, and how do I calculate my head count for that? We put on the website again at cv.business.nj.gov a grant size estimator. Basically, you put in this is a sort of a simulation of the question on your head count later. You will tell us, you put in how many wages, and it'll spit back an FTE equivalent, so that you know what you might be otherwise eligible for. This is not an eligibility guarantor, because if you're not eligible because you answer one of the other questions in a way that renders you ineligible, you would not be eligible. But this is if you were eligible, this is what you'd be eligible for. Calculation. That's at CV, as in coronavirus.business.nj.gov. Next slide, please. Real quick, some other programs we've got running. I mentioned earlier the CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions. We've been partnering with them. We put a $10 million fund together of a first loss reserve fund, where we're essentially taking some of the risk of their loans. They're making loans of up to $75,000, no higher than 3 3/4 for an interest rate, no longer than 5 years. So meant to be flexible, reasonably long-term, to help people get through the crisis. Next slide, please. We're working with 6 CDFIs across the state. I'll give Greater Newark Enterprises Corp a shout out here, given we're on the phone with the Alliance and Invest Newark. But these lots of these organizations operate statewide. A couple do have more of a regional footprint, but these are really important partners. I would encourage you to check out each of these places' websites if you're looking for loans, low interest, flexible emergency loans. They have capital available. Each of their programs is a little bit different because they're running their own programs, but they each have their own programs for COVID, and I would encourage you to check the websites of each of these organizations out if you're looking for information on that. Next slide, please. One more program that we're running. This is for younger companies. Obviously, Newark's got a great emerging young company scene. If you are an equity-funded company and you've had trouble raising money, and you can't go to a bank because you're pre-revenue and almost certainly pre-profit. If you're pre-revenue, you're definitely pre-profit. You're pre-profit and probably often pre-revenue. We are making loan guarantees. If you can get an existing third-party investor to loan you some money, we'll do an 80% guarantee on that loan, up to $250,000 for small businesses under 25 people, under 5 million of revenue. This is virtually along the 8 priority sectors, not just tech and life sciences, but food and beverage and clean energy. Lots of different sectors there. This is a program that's got lots of interest and lots of applications, but it is not oversubscribed. So if you're interested in making an application here, check out, again, this is also on cv.business.nj.gov. Next slide, please. We also have, as many of you hopefully know, even before this crisis, we have a big focus on small business. We have existing small business tools that are available that run the gamut of different features and facets. I would encourage you to check out NJEDA.com for more information on all these programs, or send us an email. We have a customer. There's an email you can. It's customercare@njeda.com that you can send an email to, and we can help work with you to identify which of these programs might fit for you. Next slide, please. One last item. It's not a financial support program, but it's a really important tool. We've heard from a lot of businesses, large and small, but particularly from small businesses, that as they are allowed to reopen and being encouraged to reopen, they're challenged to access PPE, personal protective equipment, for their businesses, for their customers, for their employers, for their suppliers. They're having difficulty with reliability. They're having difficulty with pricing, all of which we totally understand. The state's been engaged in a battle to get PPE for itself for several months now. A number of firms, more than 1,000 businesses, have offered to sell stuff to the state. We've basically said, okay, we're going to turn that information around and make it available to the public, to businesses. And there's more than 1,000 businesses that are registered trying to sell stuff to the state. We're turning that around to the private sector and to nonprofits. If you wish to look at that list and shop from it, you're welcome to. All that fine print at the bottom basically says the state is not endorsing any of those vendors. The state is not saying those are good prices or good products or good people. We're not saying they're bad people or bad prices or bad products either. But we're encouraging you to do your own due diligence. This is just a list. These are folks who have reached out to us saying, hey, we got masks, we've got gloves, we've got thermometers, we've got gowns, whatever. And this is now available to the public. If you wish to be listed on that, if you are a vendor, you can also fill a form out and be listed as on that registry as well. All this is at cv.business.nj.gov. Next slide, please. Okay, there we go. I'll real quickly just mention I've got the honor to be one of the 3 co-chairs of the Governor's Restart and Recovery Advisory Council, which is helping gather feedback and input to support the governor through all the decisions that he has to make, either himself or in concert with legislative leadership. Both myself, Jose Lozano, who's the CEO of Choose New Jersey, and Zakiya Smith-Ellis, who as of today is the Secretary of Higher Education, but it was announced yesterday in just what is extraordinarily good news for a brilliant leader, is going to be the governor's chief policy advisor. But for now, she's stuck co-chairing this committee with us before she gets to go do that big job, which is just such great news. If you don't know her, as someone who's an extraordinary leader and brilliant, and someone I'm so thrilled to be able to work with, and now she gets this even bigger platform to influence the shape of the state's policy direction. So what a great thing. Anyway, enough about that. I really like Zakiya, because you couldn't tell. Next slide, please. The last thing I'll mention, I think this is my very last slide, and then we'll take questions and get to the panel. Again, all this there's tons of information flying around, not just on financial support programs, but on guidance for businesses to do outdoor dining, or guidance for how to do childcare according to the latest guidance. All that information, tons of it. It's on CV, as in coronavirus.business.nj.gov. We also have a tool on there. There's lots of programs, all of which are well-meaning, some of which are confusing, including some of our own. Which programs you might be eligible for. There's a little wizard tool. You type in, what kind of business you are, how many employees you have, how much revenue you have, and it'll tell you a list of programs you might be eligible for as a way just to point you in the right direction. We talked about the grant size calculator. That's out there. The last thing I'll mention is obviously tons and tons and tons of unemployment, more than 1 million people from New Jersey filing for unemployment claims. The the surprising news is more than 50,000 jobs are listed as from businesses that are hiring during this crisis, because they're expanding, whether that's grocery stores or delivery services or building services or cleaning. There's a number of sectors that are growing to respond to this crisis. So if you're looking for work, I would encourage you to check out jobs.covid19.nj.gov. If somebody from your business, you had to let them go and they're looking for something temporary before you can bring them back, again, I would encourage them to check that out. If you are hiring, if you're one of those businesses that is growing right now, you can also list your job listings on there. It's all free. It's just a marketplace to connect job seekers and people that are hiring. So with that, thank you so much for having us on, having me on, and our team from the EDA, who I know is on, listening. It's such a critical time, such a difficult time, and a critical time for our state, for our country, as we respond to this health crisis, this economic crisis, and finally solve, hopefully, this justice and inequity crisis that we're also reminded of so hauntingly right now. With that, happy to take some questions. Bernal, are you going to lead me, or how are we doing the Q&A here? I'm happy to do whatever's easy for everybody else.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone.
Oh, hey, Vanessa.
Hi, Tim. Yeah, I'm just going to want you to cover a couple questions that have come in previously, and then we'll hit some of the ones that came in the Q&A module. If you can just reiterate who's eligible, especially those that are asking that are sole proprietors, those that do not have W-2 employees but have 1099 employees.
So sole proprietorships are eligible. They were not eligible the first time. They are eligible this time. If you have if you don't have any W-2 employees, you're going to be eligible for the minimum grant, which is $1,000, but you are eligible. It's worth noting, we know we have not cracked that code yet. We're working on some ways we can support sole props in a more robust way. We don't have an answer for that right now, but we're working on that. And so, yeah, sole props are absolutely eligible. Home-based businesses eligible as well.
And also nonprofits?
Nonprofits, generally speaking, are eligible. There's a handful of types of nonprofits that are barred by federal law from getting federal funding, but generally speaking, most nonprofits are eligible, yes.
Great. Now, how about, is the grant application based on credit?
Nope, not at all. We won't ask your credit score. We're not going to check with the agencies. The loan, which is separate from the program we're talking about today, there was a question. We had a credit rating, question on that. But for the grant, zero, none.
Great. Now, how about if a business has multiple locations? Do they submit one application or for each?
It depends on if there are franchises or if they're one corporation that has multiple locations. I think you got to put I believe you have to go where your headquarters are. I don't know that. I might not have that entirely right, but I'm pretty sure it's got to be where the sort of the top level business is located is the address. So that's how that would work.
Now, how about if it was a business that started during the pandemic? If you can just go over again the financials you need from the different quarters.
Yeah, so people that have started in the last few months are absolutely eligible. It's a little more complicated to determine the amount that they'd be eligible for and how to do that. To submit all the questions you have, and then we would, if we're going to be able to review your application, we'll work with you to figure out your eligibility, and it'll be a little bit more involved. But definitely, if you are new and definitely involved, definitely consider applying.
Now, you say the application's available and it's available in multiple languages, but they can't submit it. Will they be able to actually complete an online and then, save, or how does that work?
No, so you can look at it right now, but you can't fill it out. No one can fill it out until 9:00 on Tuesday morning. There's drawbacks to that approach, but we think it's the overall fairest way to do it. There's certainly other ways you could do it, but that's how we think is the best and most transparent way to do it. So everyone in the whole state will start at 9:00, but everyone will also have access to the questions in advance.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the language assistance program. Will they help them starting today?
They're available right now. Yep.
And they'll walk them through the actual application.
Yeah.
Now, going to some of the questions that have come in through the Q&A module, one of the questions is, can one ask for a specific amount?
So you're eligible based on the calculations based on how many employees you have. So it's $1,000 per employee, capped at 10,000.
So 1,000.
I suppose if you want less, you could tell us that, but I'd be surprised if people want less than that. But they can't ask for more. Okay.
Now, if someone applied previously in phase 1 and was denied, can they apply again?
Absolutely. If they were denied because they were ineligible because of certain criteria the first time, and those criteria have changed, they absolutely would be considered. We communicated with everyone who applied in the first round. Either they've gotten a notification that they got some money, or they got a notification that they're pretty close and should hold on to some hope, or that they're not going to make it in the first round and should apply for the second round. So we've communicated in the last 4 or 5 days with everyone who applied, all 34,000 applicants.
Okay. Now, how about if it's a new business that hasn't, obviously submitted submitted their taxes?
So depending on when they started, they might have trouble demonstrating an impact from COVID, since if they hadn't started yet, there's not a sort of certainly a terrible challenge, and we totally are sympathetic, but they might have a challenge demonstrating the financial impact of COVID if they hadn't opened yet.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly I would encourage them to think about applying still.
Now, how about an applicant's immigration status? How does that factor into the criteria in the, beginning of the application, or is not a factor at all?
We're not asking any questions about people's status. You do have to have the business has to have a taxpayer ID number, but we're not asking for information about the employees. We're asking only about the business has to have has you registered as a business in New Jersey. The business has to have a taxpayer ID number, which is a federal construct, but generally speaking, we're not getting into the immigration. We're not asking any questions about immigration status.
Now, how will they receive any communications? Every application will receive a communication?
Yeah, primarily email. We'll ask for your phone number as well in case we need it, but primarily email.
And I think another important question, separate from SBA's PPP, there were requirements of what that funding can be used for. What can this grant be used for by a business?
A really broad range of stuff. The one thing it can't be used for, construction. So this is not a grant to put a new roof on. This is not a grant to fix your generator, your stove, whatever, this is not a capital grant. This is meant for operating expenses. But payroll, rent, mortgage payments, inventory, utility bills. This is meant to be stabilization money. Use it to stay in business.
All right. And I think last question is, can the grant be used for any debt?
It can be used to pay your interest for sure. I don't know if there's a restriction on using it to pay down debt. I wouldn't, but that's just me. I would use it to keep my operations going. But yeah, you can use it for operating expenses generally.
Great. Well, I think that was our last question. With that, leave you with some closing remarks.
Yeah, sure. Just Aisha, you want to jump in?
No, I was going to thank you, but please add your remarks.
No, I was going to say the same to you. Thanks to Burnell and Aisha and the host for doing this. Vanessa, thanks for those great questions. Again, please take the time to look at the application in advance. If you wake up Tuesday morning hoping to sort of wing it, you're going to be at a disadvantage. Please check out the application in advance. It's on cv.business.nj.gov. Get your paperwork together. It's pretty straightforward. You shouldn't need to talk to your accountant. You shouldn't need to talk to your whatever advisors. This is meant to be that as easy as a funding program can be. So we're really appreciative of the time to tell you about the program. We hope we get I'm sure we'll get lots of applications. We hope we get a really broad and diverse and inclusive group. Hopefully we'll get lots from Newark because it's such an important priority for us. So with that, thank you so much, and so glad to have you, and looking forward to hearing the panel for a few minutes before I've got to hop.
Thanks, Tim. Definitely appreciate your time, your leadership. Really have enjoyed working together more closely at EDA, and I think it's worth noting for everyone that Tim is leading with a lens of equity, and he's steering a very big ship and trying to make a lot of changes. And I think even the move to bring on marketing firms and recognizing some of EDA's blind spots. Tim and I have had conversations where, it's very, very clear that he's personally and professionally he's moving EDA in that direction and recognizing the blind spots. So just really appreciate your leadership and want to thank you, not just for today, but really for trying to push the needle forward on economic equity in our city and state.
Thank you, Aisha. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
And with that, I will turn it over and introduce Medina from Medina Equal City and Equal Space, creative strategist, CEO, entrepreneur. Medina wears many, many hats, literally and figuratively. But I think what he does well is really try to hold space and really try to make sure he's representing minority-owned businesses, that he's really sharing some of the challenges and struggles of entrepreneurs. I've been reading some of the questions coming up in the Q&A and the chat box, and in many respects, some of the businesses don't have full-time employees, right? And that is often what we're faced with. And Medina has raised this issue, and Tim and I have had direct conversations about how do you really address businesses that have 1099 employees or hire as needed, right? And so when you think about standing up programs like this, you really have to take into consideration how layered we are, right? And some of the unique challenges that Black and Brown businesses face. So Medina has been a tremendous advocate in that space, and particularly grateful for his work, of course, in the city of Newark, but in helping to try to get the word out to minority-owned businesses in the state. So turn it over to you now, Medina.
Thank you so much, Aisha. And thank you to Tim, Burnell, of course, our great Mayor, Ras Baraka, and Letitia, for the work that you are all doing during this time. I can't tell you as a small business owner how grateful I am to have leadership like this across the state and in the city of Newark. I'm not going to speak, and Tim, close your ears. I'm not going to speak like I'm not 100% biased to everybody on this call, because I am a small business owner, headquartered in Newark, proudly living in Newark. So when this opportunity to be selected as one of 3 agencies, and I always give the other agencies of color that we do statewide and national capacity. So shout out to 360 NPR and also to the Tara Dowdell group who were selected to do this work. This work is probably the most purposeful campaign I've done in a while, because during this time, it is our opportunity as small business owners to gain access. And I mean, equity, we have long conversations with Aisha and Tim about what it looks like to be equitable and to develop equitably across the state. And this is one of those big moves. So my purpose of talking with you all is, as a business owner, I want you all to really sit there. This application will be going live on next Tuesday at 9 a.m. So at 8:45, have your coffee and your tea ready, have your paperwork already pre-prepped. I have even personally filled out these applications before myself to make sure that I'm able to do it. Take advantage of the resources that Invest Newark, Newark Alliance are providing you with, so that you can be prepared for this next Tuesday. That's hugely important to me, because I want to make sure that all of my small businesses in Newark will reopen. The really shocking statistic is that 60 to 70% of small businesses of color across the nation will not reopen their doors because of COVID-19. That, for me, will not be the story of Newark. We will continually go, and we will continually do a series of moves that will show the nation that we're a model to follow when it comes to recovering and to moving forward. So do so by applying for this, for staying united, and to acknowledging and making sure that when these opportunities do come across, we make sure to show up. I look forward to working with you guys. If you do have follow-up questions, you can find me on social. I'm answering DM questions. My team and I are not sleeping. Tim has been I call him the Olympian of Zooms and webinars. The same thing with Michelle Bowden and the entire senior management of EDA. They're doing over 26 webinars and going to make sure that all of us have this information. So you can find me on CITI Medina on any of the platforms, and I will be sure to try to connect you with any of the resources. Burnell, thank you for having me. Tim, thank you for selecting my agency to partner with you on this. And of course, Aisha, thank you for the intro, because it was super dope, and I feel all kinds of shiny right now. To my fellow Newark businesses, I believe in you all. I know we will get through this. We will come out Newark stronger, and let's make sure to do that. I can't wait to hear this panel that's upcoming, and from the words of Letitia Vickery as well. So let's make that happen, guys. Thank you. And back to you, Vanessa. Or Burnell.
Thank you, Vidita. So obviously, we have got a live platform here, and we want to introduce Chi Osu, our Chief Opportunity Zone Officer for the City of Newark. Tim mentioned how this Phase 2 program is more inclusive to availability to opportunity zone census tracts, and we'll have Chi explain to us exactly what does that mean for your business and for Newark. Chi?
Sure. Thank you, Vanessa. I'd like to share my screen in a sec. So thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Tim, Aisha, and Barnell Hall for putting this together. This is a great tool, a great resource. We've learned from the past financial crisis, and also we're seeing in this pandemic that low-income communities are usually the hardest hit and the last to recover. And that is why it is so important that the EDA put aside $15 million for OZ eligible census tracts. And that is very profound. A lot of the question that I've gotten a lot as the Chief Opportunity Zone Officer is, what is the Opportunity Zone program, and what is it about? So I'd like to spend a few minutes to just sort of provide a high level overview of what the OZ program is about. The program was sponsored by our own Senator Cory Booker, and it was originally 8 pages that was embedded into the larger Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, which created qualified opportunity zones. And the law assigned responsibilities to governors to designate up to 25% of eligible census tracts, and New Jersey has about 715, based on a poverty rate of 20% and an average area income of less than 80%. And then as a result of that, the governor designated 169 zones in New Jersey as opportunity zones spread across 75 municipalities, of which 13 is located in Newark, and that's the map that you see before you. The governor worked with our mayor to strategically pick within Newark areas that are in dire need of redevelopment, areas that are prime for economic growth, areas that are close to transit hubs, and areas that are and also other industrial areas that need this type of investment. Now, another question that I get is how do people take advantage of this program? What are the benefits? What are the tax benefits? What the program actually does is incentivize private capital to invest in these lower income census tracts by providing some tax incentives. And some of those tax incentives is through a tax deferral. Essentially, if you have own property, you own assets that you sell and that are eligible for gain, and you redeploy that capital in an opportunity zone, then you are eligible for a tax deferral, which is due in 2026. Essentially, because we're in 2020 now, if you sold an investment, a property or an asset, your Amazon stock, and redeploy that in a qualified opportunity zone and held that investment to 2026, you get a step up in basis, which is the second benefit of about 10%, which essentially saying is a reduction, 10% reduction in your taxes. Then if you hold that investment for 10 years and a day, then you're eligible for a tax exclusion, meaning that investment, you do not have to pay any taxes on it. A second incentive that is not generally talked about is for those of you that own property. Residential property, as you know, is depreciated over 27.5 years. Commercial property is depreciated over 39 years. That's a phantom expense that you get to deduct, but it's not an expense that comes out of your pocket. What happens is at the end of your holding period, you have to pay what is called a depreciation recapture tax. But with this program, you do not have to pay that. That is also excluded from the taxes that you would have to pay. Now, the program that started off as 8 pages that was embedded into the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017 now has grown into about 540 pages in the final regulations that came out in December of last year. So it's very complex, has a lot of moving parts, various timelines, thresholds to meet. And I would love to have the opportunity to walk you through for you to learn more about the program. I've provided some websites here that the state has created for you to learn. For instance, if you are in an eligible OZ census tract, if your business or property is located in an opportunity zone, the state has a one-stop shop site that gives you a lot of information about opportunity zones. There's an opportunity zone marketplace, which I provided the websites for. There's a lot of other resources. My office is in contact with qualified opportunity funds that are looking for investments in opportunity zones. And to the extent that your business or your property fits what they're looking for, I'm more than happy to make that connection. And my contact is provided here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. That was very helpful. And, I think it provides some additional insight to opportunity zones and census tracts in Newark that many people are probably not aware of. With that, I want to bring it back to information for our businesses. Let me introduce to you Dr. Letitia Vickery. She is a professor of entrepreneurship and the chair of Delta NJAC Small Business Ready program. Dr. Vickery?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining here and for sticking through to the end of the program. Again, that number of 60 to 70% of our businesses not making it through this pandemic is really important to us. So in addition to making sure that our small businesses have the necessary funding to continue surviving, we really also want to make sure that our businesses can plan. And so that means setting up resiliency plans. So for the next 2 minutes, I will be talking about how our businesses can look into setting up their resiliency planning so that by the end of the pandemic, they can really take that money to not just survive, but also thrive. So what that includes is starting with your value proposition. Are you repackaging the current offering that you have with a touch for the needs of the community now, right? All of our community members, they are currently focused on creating a sense of normalcy. So whether you're a business that's providing direct services and products to customers, or you're a business that's providing to businesses, you're really thinking about how can I help my clientele get back to that normal routine that they're used to, and then also how do I help them catch up, right? Because for so many of us, our lives have shifted in various ways. So you're really thinking about what can you do in the interim, and then also what can you do in the future to help them find that sense of normalcy again. And with the pandemic, many new spaces and niches has arisen for businesses to really step in and do that. Third, we're looking at how do you interact, right? And how do you reach your clients and how do you get to them right now? So what we found ourselves doing, a lot of businesses have now shifted to this online environment. So with the online environment, we know that many of our small businesses might not have been fully prepared to provide their services and products online. So you're really looking for the people who can help you transition into that space more narrowly. Also, again, going back to that very personalized touch with pulling your clientele in. We're now moving into a space where we're not worried about the lockdown, but we're worried about what does reopening our businesses and what does reopening our doors and getting back to the community actually look like. So that means your clients are very worried and very much paying attention to how do I keep myself safe? How do I keep myself healthy, even as I go out there? And now that we are also having to deal with being a part of protests and things like that, right? So you have to think about the context, the environmental context that your business is fitting itself into. How can you provide that reassurance about health, safety concerns that your clients may have? And then you're also considering the type of presence that you currently have. So how do you want your clients to remember you as they move forward and shift into this new way of living that we found ourselves in? Fifth, your revenue streams. All of our revenue streams are very strapped right now as business owners, right? Which is why we have such a need for understanding how to access the different funds that are being rolled out. But what we also want to focus on when you're creating a resiliency plan is how do you make sure that you're developing revenue streams that can support the foundation of your business. So you may have your mainstay of what you do, the main type of clients that you service or provide products to, but are there any additional revenue streams that you can craft and get up and running relatively quickly that can provide you with some additional funding, not just for now, but possibly even a year or 2 or 3 out into the future, right? So you really want to pay attention to what those can be. Then 6, you're looking at key resources. What do you need? So there are areas in our business, all of our businesses, where we can strengthen and do a little better to fill our gaps, right? And so the way you want to do that, because as a business owner, you're responsible for everything and you have so much going on just trying to get access to the funds, filling out all of these applications that are coming up and moving forward. So who in your current environment can help you actually strengthen your areas of weakness? Who are those partners that you can lean on that can provide you with different needed necessary resources? So some of us are looking at developing our online platforms. Are there businesses out there and organizations that are providing free technical services, right, that can support us in this time? And there are, and we're going to talk about that. Then how do you stay on top of changing information? So you want to make sure that you follow the right social media sites for your local, state, federal government agencies that are rolling out funds all the time. You want to make sure that you are connected to your local support organizations like Invest Newark, like Newark Alliance, like IFL that can really target you with the information that is right for your industry. And then finally, you're thinking about what it costs, right? We're all in a stage where we're cutting costs. So some of the tips for cutting those costs can be reaching out to your service providers and your loan providers to negotiate short-term plans. How can you reduce your costs? And if they are unwilling to negotiate those plans, then you really need to be considering switching your service providers. Look over your contracts. Think about, are there any loopholes in the contracts that you have signed up to and how you can decrease those costs? And a lot of the work done here really requires individual consulting, right? Really requires someone sitting down with you and brainstorming. So what the Delta NJAC Small Business Ready program is doing is trying to build out profiles for the different organizations that we have here in the city of Newark, as well as other cities in our service areas, which include Hudson, Union, and Essex counties, to try to make sure that the businesses that are connected to our programming can be directed to the necessary support organizations within the city of Newark and our other service areas that have the resources that can help them. One of the businesses and organizations that we have partnered with that's sponsored through Institute of Entrepreneurial Leadership is called smallbusinessesneedus.org. And through that organization, we'll be able to get all of the small businesses doing this work, trying to survive and thrive through the pandemic, the help that they need. Specific resources. So meaning if you need to build a website, we can get you someone who can do that. If you need to write up a contract for a new venture that you're starting, we can get you someone who can do that. If you need help with your books, if you need help setting up a new kind of accounting system, a new kind of time management system, we can get you someone who can help you do that. So if you need more information, please contact us at economicdevelopment@northjerseydeltas.org. And we are really looking forward to seeing how you survive and thrive through this pandemic.
Thank you, Letitia. Wonderful, wonderful information. I hope that the small businesses that are on the phone take full advantage of not just the access to capital that we are providing collectively, but also the access to information that can really help you make some of the operational decisions necessary to take advantage of this opportunity and not just react to it from a position of economic pain. We thank you again, Letitia, and all of the work that you do, and hope that we continue to partner in a more expansive way going forward so that our small businesses can benefit from the wealth of information that you shared. As Aisha mentioned earlier, it takes a village, especially in trying times such as the one that we're facing. But it also takes great dynamic leadership, and we are fortunate to have that in the form of Mayor Baraka and specifically Deputy Mayor Allison Ladd. I have the pleasure of working very closely with Allison on a day-to-day basis because she serves as the chair of our board at Invest Newark, but she also is a partner who has been extremely creative and execution-oriented in creating a plethora of COVID-19 response initiatives that she will discuss in further detail as we progress in the program. Allison, thank you for your time. We look forward to hearing.
Thank you, Burnell. I appreciate the kind introduction. Yes, it's just wonderful to be with everybody. Always a pleasure to be with people at the state level, and Tim, and of course, our partners with Invest Newark, Newark Alliance, and others. So thank you for this opportunity. Knowing the time, I just wanted to focus on three things today. In the city of Newark, we really do want our businesses, our small businesses, to be able to recover and reopen. And so the mayor has set bold vision and taken leadership in concert with our governor. And I think that what our goals have been is to be aligned and find ways that we help our businesses thrive. I agree with you, Letitia. We do need our businesses to thrive beyond COVID-19. So the three things I wanted to share with you today are, one, we have a one-stop here in the city of Newark. It's a website called newarkcovid19.com. newarkcovid19.com. And this website will give you information about financial resources. It'll give you information about guidance on how to reopen your business. It'll give you information about state programs and state level guidance. And it's really meant to help each and every one of you have the information you need today so that we can see you tomorrow here doing business in the city of Newark. So please visit newarkcovid19.com. Second, I wanted to share that we are continuing to work with you on financial solutions. As Burnell mentioned, the mayor had a program that he launched back in March for small businesses, where we had about $2.5 million available to help our businesses. And we would agree with you, Tim. We are working to be even more nimble and more quick to be able to deliver the resources needed to businesses and meet them where they are. So look to hear more from us in the city of Newark, and we'll be posting that information on newarkcovid19.com. And finally, as we're looking to the future and we're looking to reopen, we had instrumental partners who led this reopening and recovery strike force on behalf of Mayor Baraka. Aisha Glover, President CEO of Newark Alliance, along with our Chief of Staff, Amiri Baraka, were able to lead this private sector engagement to ensure that we had a safe and healthy way to reopen our city. And so the report was released this past week, and we're really proud to be able to give the guidance to our residents and to our businesses and to our stakeholders who want to be here in our city. So the last thing I wanted to share is for businesses that are looking to reopen, we're excited too. We want you to reopen, so please, let's work together. The best way for you to reopen quickly is to apply for the city to approve your reopening plan. And then we will evaluate it in 72 hours. And then we'll have someone come inspect your business. And if everything meets the same standards, we'll be able to give you a color-coded sign to place in your window, and you can open curbside and continue to do the takeout services that you've been providing during COVID-19. And we'll look to continue to assist you beyond. So that permit and that process can be reached at the same location as the One Stop, newarkcovid19.com. And so please go there, apply today so that we can help you reopen, and you can reopen in the very near future. There will be future guidance about each phase related to outside dining, as well as our barbers and nail salons and hair salons and our gyms. But for now, we're focused on our non-essential retail businesses and restaurants, and we want to make sure that they can open and thrive during this time. So wanted to thank Burnell for the time that you offered for me to be here. It's been my pleasure. I look forward to seeing you all very soon in person. And until then, continue to be well, and we'll talk with you soon. Thank you.
Trying to get my video on here. Thank you, Allison. We really appreciate your time. Yeah, I just want to reiterate the commitment from a very high level collection of leaders in this state. Tim Sullivan is, as you mentioned before, doing 26 of these similar webinars over the next 3 days. Allison, as she mentioned, has launched and is leading Newark reopening efforts. Aisha is very active, working on the mayor's reopening recovery committee, and everyone else is hard at work doing very similar things to make sure that you have access to resources, information, and as well as ongoing assistance to work through the issues that we're all facing as a result of COVID-19. I'd be remiss not to thank each and every participant for their work, both in the city of Newark and beyond. It's very, very hard work given all that we're facing at the same time. but we know that it's nothing compared to what you as a small business owner is going through. We hope that the information that was shared today and the resources that have been aggregated is going to give you the type of push that you need, not only to survive the COVID-19 pandemic, but also to thrive as we recover and reopen through it. Lastly, I just want to thank my Senior Vice President of Business Development, Vanessa Quijano, for her work in organizing this webinar. I also want to thank Della Walker of the Newark Alliance and her work in organizing the webinar. And I would be remiss not to reiterate what Tim said earlier about the work that Ty Cooper is doing to make sure Newark is front and center as it relates to New Jersey's economic growth and equity strategy. So with that being said, this webinar has been recorded and will be available on multiple websites, including the state's website, Invest Newark, the city's website. You will have access to all of the email addresses and websites mentioned. And as Tim mentioned, we should not wait. We should not tarry. Please download the sample application, review it. If there's a question about it, please reach out to Invest Newark as we are continuing to offer technical assistance in partnership with Audible and Newark Venture Partners to all that have reached out to us and set up a virtual appointment to get that assistance. We really want to make sure this process is easy and efficient so that you can get the help you need to take your business where you want it to go. We thank you and we wish you the best and have a great afternoon, everyone.